It happened between boarding zones and baggage delays, the moment my life circled back on itself and folded like paper. I was sitting near gate 37A, hunched over a cup of airport coffee that tasted like regret and cardboard, when the past walked by in heels. No, this isn't one of those stories where I pine for her or wish I could go back. This isn't about closure. This is about exposure, hers. I didn't recognize her at first. I saw a woman walking briskly toward the monitors, checking her phone, her hair pulled into a polish not like she had somewhere important to be. But something in her walk, it was too familiar, too rehearsed, like someone trying to stay ahead of guilt. And then as she turned, and my stomach dropped. Melanie. 9 years. 9 birthdays. 9 Christmases. 9 long New Year's Eves where I'd look out the window pretending I didn't miss anything. I thought I'd moved on. I told myself that. I believed it, until that second. She hadn't seen me yet. And I could have left it at that, just quietly observed the woman who once dismantled my sense of worth like it was clutter in her closet. But I didn't. Instead, I stood up. Not to confront. Not to speak. Just to exist in her line of sight. I guess I wanted her to feel it, that I was still here. That I wasn't buried under the silence she left me in. She looked up. And froze. It was only a second. 1 second of eye contact. But in that second, I saw every lie she ever told me shove its way to the surface. Her lips trembled. Her shoulders stiffened. And then, something I never expected, she sat down. Right there on the floor. Bag slipping from her hands. Like the weight of everything she'd buried for nearly a decade had finally collapsed inside her. Let me rewind. 9 years ago, my life didn't just fall apart. It imploded while I was too polite to ask why. I didn't storm out. I didn't scream. I didn't even get the satisfaction of slamming a door. I just faded from my own marriage. Faded until I became invisible, and then she left. She took more than just her belongings when she disappeared. She took answers. She took the version of me that still believed in people. And worst of all, she took my name from our story. Because when people asked why she left, she didn't say, I cheated. She said, he wasn't enough. And that version stuck. I wasn't enough. That line echoed for years. Through cold nights and short emails and birthdays spent alone. Through every awkward date I walked out on. Every therapist who asked if I had properly expressed my grief. Through every family dinner where I had to fake a smile because no one wanted to hear about betrayal. They wanted updates, not ruins. And now here she was, sitting cross-legged by a vending machine at gate 37A, looking up at me like I held the match, and she was made of paper. She didn't say a word. Not then. Not yet. But her silence finally meant something. And I wasn't sure whether I wanted to walk away or make her say it out loud. She didn't speak. Not at first. Not when our eyes met. Not when her body sank against the cold airport tiles like her legs no longer believed they were allowed to carry her forward. I stayed standing. I didn't offer help. Didn't ask if she was okay. We both knew she wasn't. Her hand trembled as she reached for her phone, then abandoned the attempt. She glanced up at me, mouth half open like a sentence had started forming in her throat, but was too afraid of how it might end. I watched her closely, not like a man seeing an old flame, but like someone recognizing the echo of a fire that once burned down his home. She looked like a woman who'd been running for 9 years and didn't think I'd ever stand in her path again. You're not supposed to be here, she finally whispered. That sentence. The way she said it, not shocked, not guilty, more like she was accusing fate of misfiring. Like the world had broken some unspoken deal by placing me in front of her at a terminal surrounded by strangers and time zones and missed flights. I know, I said quietly, voice flat. Neither were you. That shut her up. For a long moment, we just sat in it, the thick, ugly silence that only two people with unfinished damage can share. I should have kept walking. I knew that. But there was something in her eyes. It wasn't just regret. It was panic. Like something much bigger than coincidence was unraveling inside her. And then, without warning, she burst into tears. Not the kind you hide behind your hands. Not the kind that wants pity. This was messy, heaving, shoulder-shaking sobbing. People started to glance over, unsure whether to help. I could see an older woman near the snack kiosk looking at me like I was the villain in a breakup movie. I wanted to tell her that I wasn't the one who cheated, who vanished, who rebuilt a new life on a lie, but I didn't have the energy to justify my own face. Melanie cried like the walls had finally caved in, and she had nowhere left to hide. I knelt down beside her. Not out of love. Just decency. She wasn't the person I loved anymore, but I'm still the kind of man who can't ignore someone falling apart in public, even if that someone once left me in pieces. I handed her a napkin from my coffee. She didn't take it at first. Then she did, slowly, her fingers brushing mine with a familiar weight I hadn't felt in almost a decade. She wiped her eyes and said, barely above a whisper, "I thought you were dead." I blinked. "What?" "I mean, not literally," she choked out. "But no one could find you. You disappeared. You didn't answer anything. I thought maybe something happened." I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. "You left me with a 4-line note and vanished. You drained our joint savings and ghosted half our mutual friends. And you thought I was dead." I panicked. Emmett. She was trembling. "I wasn't supposed to feel anything when I saw you. But I do." I sat back on my heels. My name in her mouth still sounded like manipulation. And yet, I could see it now. Behind her eyes. She wasn't just surprised. She was scared. She wasn't breaking down because she missed me. She was breaking down because something about me being alive, visible, real, it threatened something she built her entire life around. "Are you married?" I asked. She flinched. "That's what I thought." Melanie looked down. Her fingers clutched the edges of her designer coat like armor. And then, like the crack was widening, she whispered, "He doesn't know. About you. About what I did." I exhaled slowly, a pressure building behind my eyes. "You mean the part where you erased me?" She nodded. Silent. Fragile. That's when I understood. I wasn't her mistake. I was her secret. A buried piece of history she prayed would never resurface. A scar she never confessed to the man who shared her bed now. And now I was standing in the middle of her carefully curated life like a living obituary. She didn't expect me to still be breathing. I leaned in a little. Not close enough to comfort her, just enough to be heard. "You said you wanted more than our life. That you needed to find yourself. Did you?" Melanie didn't answer. But her silence said more than I needed. I should have walked away. That's what a healthy man would have done. A strong man. But I'm not that. I'm the guy who once spent an entire winter fixing a broken bathroom heater just because she said her toes were cold. The guy who stayed quiet for years so she could chase independence that somehow always smelled like men's cologne and hotel sheets. So no, I didn't walk away. I sat down beside her instead, in that unforgiving airport corridor, watching her try to put her mask back on. She kept dabbing her eyes with that napkin like it was going to rewrite the past. Like if she wiped fast enough, she could push the tears back in and pretend they were never there. But her hands were shaking. Her eyes kept darting to the left, toward the terminal entrance. She wasn't looking for a way out, she was checking for someone. I leaned forward just a bit and asked, "Is he here?" Her spine stiffened like I'd hit a nerve. She didn't answer, but the way her eyes flicked again gave me everything I needed. She hadn't just run into me by accident. She was with him. Somewhere close. Maybe in the restroom. Maybe getting coffee. Maybe walking this way. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Then something happened. Something I wasn't ready for. Her phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen before she could flip it over. Just a flash of a name. Daniel, Terminal C. And underneath it, "Got your tea. Where are you?" "Daniel." So that was him. She read the message. Her thumb hovered over the screen like she didn't know what to say. And then she did the thing that twisted my stomach. She turned off the screen. Just like that. As if by ignoring him, she could erase the present and stay in this weird, fragile moment with me. "What does he think you are?" I asked, keeping my voice low. His clean slate wife? His redemption story? Or does he know he's sleeping next to a woman who lies with her whole body? She inhaled sharply, like my words were air-turned poison. "You don't know him." "I know enough to feel sorry for him," I said. "Does he know about the money? The apartment you secretly leased before leaving me? The months you were seeing both of us and letting me plan anniversary dinners while you had someone else warming your weekends?" Her lip trembled. And then she snapped. "You think I didn't suffer too? You think it was easy for me to live with that guilt?" I didn't even flinch. "No. I think it was easy enough for you to lie about it for 9 years." She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came. And I watched it hit her. Right there in that moment. The truth. Not the pretty kind. Not the kind she rehearsed in mirrors before weddings or in wine-fueled confessions to her yoga friends. The actual truth. She hadn't just left a man. She'd rewritten history. Told people I was distant, uninspired, emotionally unavailable. Meanwhile, I was the one folding her laundry and writing her poems she never read. I was the one emailing her favorite bakery to surprise her with the exact chocolate croissant she liked the week she got promoted. But she never told anyone that. She told them I wasn't enough. And that lie stuck. It shaped me. Hollowed me out. Her voice came out broken. I didn't know how to stop once it started. The story I told everyone. It just got easier to keep telling it. That's what finally did it. I felt something shift in me. Not rage. Not sadness. Something heavier. I don't know the word for it, but it felt like I'd been carrying around a body that didn't belong to me, and in that moment, I finally set it down. I lived in your lie, I said. I made space for it. Lost friends over it. Stopped trusting people because of it. And now, 9 years later, you're still hiding. She pressed her palms against her face, shaking her head. I never thought I'd see you again. I thought maybe you left the country or changed your name or... Why? I interrupted. Because that made it easier to sleep next to him? She didn't respond. Her silence was a confession. Then, just when I thought it couldn't go deeper, she did something I didn't see coming. She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn envelope. It was creased, yellowing at the edges, as if it had been handled too many times. She hesitated, then placed it on my lap. I wrote it, she said, 3 months after I left. I never sent it. I looked at the envelope. My name was scrawled in her old handwriting, the way she used to sign birthday cards. I didn't move to open it. I couldn't. Not yet. What's in it? I asked. A lot, she whispered. Things I've never said out loud. Things I've tried to forget. And suddenly, I understood something terrible. She hadn't broken down because she missed me. She broke down because her lie had finally come face to face with the only person who could prove it never happened that way. Me. The envelope weighed more than paper should. It was thick, aged, maybe water-damaged, or maybe those were tears. But knowing Melanie, if they were, they'd be the kind she cried for herself, not for me. I didn't open it. Not yet. I just held it. It felt like holding an autopsy report of a life I once lived, one that she had walked out of like it was a bad rental apartment. She was still sitting beside me on that cold floor, legs tucked under her like a schoolgirl who got caught cheating on a test. But this wasn't a test. This was the final exam she never studied for, and I was the answer key she thought she'd lost for good. I didn't want to talk anymore. I didn't want to hear more of her unfinished thoughts or trembling apologies that sounded like rehearsals for sympathy. But I was still me, still the guy who listened too long, stayed too soft, gave too many second chances in silence. So I asked, even though I hated myself for it, what were you going to do with it? Melanie blinked, confused. The letter. No, the lie. If I hadn't shown up today, if fate hadn't botched your layover, would you have ever told him about me? She hesitated. That split-second pause, it was a knife. Because we both knew what it meant. No, she said finally. I don't think I would have. And there it was. The truth. Not the dramatic kind that comes with fireworks and screaming and tears. No. It was a quiet truth. The worst kind. The kind that slips into your bloodstream and makes everything feel just a little colder. She would have let me be buried in silence. Would have built a marriage on the ashes of mine. And she would have smiled through it, year after year, until the lie became something she could say without blinking. I told him I was divorced because things just fell apart, she added, her voice barely above the noise of suitcase wheels and boarding announcements. That we were incompatible. That you didn't want kids. That I left before I lost myself. I nodded slowly. Everything you said was almost true. That's the genius of it, right? A half-truth doesn't leave evidence. She looked like she wanted to disappear. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Did you love him while you were still with me? I asked. Melanie's eyes dropped to the floor. Her lips pressed tight like she was trying to keep the words from leaking out. It wasn't love, she said finally. It was escape. I should have felt validated. I didn't. It made me feel worse. Because even now, even when she was sitting in the fallout, she still couldn't call it what it was. Betrayal. She needed to turn it into something noble, something necessary. I don't know why I expected more. Maybe I just wanted her to finally be honest, if not with me, then with herself. A voice crackled over the airport speakers. Final boarding call for Flight 189 to Chicago. Melanie looked up sharply. That was her flight. Her face went pale, but she didn't move. For the first time since I saw her, she looked truly lost. Not the curated kind of lost you post about on Instagram next to a sunset. This was real disorientation. Like she'd taken a wrong turn 9 years ago and just now realized it had led her somewhere she didn't belong. I picked up the envelope again, turned it over in my hand. You still want me to read this? I don't know, she said. Maybe not now. Maybe never, I replied, not unkindly. And then I saw it. Him. Daniel. Walking down the terminal, holding 2 cups of tea and looking around. His pace was casual, his face kind. completely unaware that the woman he married was sitting on the floor 20 feet away, unraveling in front of a man who used to call her his wife. I stood up slowly, and Melanie panicked. "Please," she whispered, grabbing my arm. "Don't say anything. Please." I stared at her hand, then at her eyes. The panic wasn't because she was afraid of me, it was because she was afraid of the truth. And in that moment, I understood just how deep the lie went. "You're not scared of losing him," I said. "You're scared of him finding out who you really are." Her hand dropped. Daniel spotted her. His face lit up. He raised a hand and started walking faster. Melanie stood too, brushing her coat down, fixing her hair, wiping under her eyes like she could erase the past with makeup and a smile. She turned to me one last time. "I'm sorry," she said. "But sorry doesn't rewind time. Sorry doesn't rebuild a man. Sorry doesn't erase the way silence can hollow out your chest every night for 9 years." I tucked the envelope into my jacket pocket, stepped around her, and walked away. I didn't look back. But I knew when Daniel reached her and kissed her cheek, when he handed her the tea and she forced that same smile I'd seen so many times, I knew something inside her had finally broken. Because for the first time, I didn't. I walked away. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just enough to make it clear that I wasn't part of her world anymore. Not the one she was pretending to hold together in front of Daniel. I slipped into the crowd of travelers, into that anonymous hum of movement, where no one knew my name, or hers, or what just happened. That's what I wanted. To disappear again. But the envelope burned in my jacket. I ended up sitting near a quiet end of the terminal, close to an out-of-order charging station and a window overlooking the runway. I stared out at the tarmac, at the blinking lights and the rain streaking down the glass, but my hand kept drifting to that letter. I didn't want to read it, because I knew, deep down, it would open a door I'd already nailed shut. And yet, I couldn't stop myself. Curiosity is cruel like that. So I unfolded it. Slowly. The paper was worn, like it had been carried around for years. Maybe it had. I could picture her, taking it in and out of drawers, reading it alone at night, wondering if mailing it would make her less of a villain. Here's what it said. Emmett. I'm writing this 3 months after I left because I've realized that running from the truth doesn't make it disappear. It just waits. It always waits. I didn't leave because you weren't enough. That's a lie I told myself to make it easier. The truth is, I was terrified you were enough, and that meant I had to be too. You were steady, present. You loved without keeping score. And I wasn't ready for the kind of life you were building for us. I cheated before I knew I would. I think part of me started cheating the moment I stopped being honest with myself. And by the time it became physical, I had already crossed so many lines in my head that I couldn't even feel them anymore. He wasn't better than you. He wasn't even someone I loved. He was just easy to become someone else with. Someone who didn't know the version of me that needed fixing. I never wanted to erase you. But when people asked, I panicked. I told them you didn't understand me, that you didn't want more out of life, that we fell apart. It was easier than telling them I broke something I once begged for. I thought you'd hate me. I hoped you would. Because if you hated me, it meant you wouldn't hurt. It meant I could live with myself. But you didn't. You vanished instead. And that silence, that nothingness, it's followed me every day since. I still wear the watch you gave me. I tell people it's from my husband, and I let them assume I mean Daniel. I'm sorry I lied. I'm sorry I took the easy road. I'm sorry I didn't say any of this to your face. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you live a life that makes mine look small. M. When I finished, I just sat there for a long time. Not angry. Not even sad. Just tired. Her words were carefully chosen, probably rewritten 100 times. But no matter how elegant the phrasing, they didn't change the ending. She hadn't written that letter for me. She wrote it for herself, to prove she still had a conscience. And maybe she did, but only after she'd buried it under convenience for almost a decade. I folded the letter and stared at it in my hands. Part of me wanted to burn it. Another part wanted to mail it back to her, unopened, with the words "too late" scribbled across the front. But what I did instead surprised even me. I placed it gently into the trash bin beside the seat. No fire. No drama. Just release. Because I didn't need it. I didn't need her rewritten version of events. I didn't need her apologies, or her self-awareness, or her regret. I had lived in the silence she left behind. I had rebuilt myself in it. She never got to see that part, because it didn't serve her narrative. But now, for the first time, I understood something vital. She didn't get to own my story anymore. I glanced at the departure board. My flight was still hours away. But I suddenly didn't feel stuck anymore. I felt light. Not healed. That's not how this works. But I wasn't waiting for closure anymore. I'd walked right into the storm, and I was still standing. I stood up, walked to a nearby cafe, and ordered a tea. The same kind I used to make for her. But this time, it was for me. I sat by the cafe window, nursing the tea she used to love, but never appreciated when I made it. Back then, she used to say it needed more honey, or that it cooled too fast. It was never quite right. Now I drank it just the way it came, no honey, no tweaks, and for the first time, I realized it tasted fine. I had always adjusted everything to her preferences, like a background character in her story. But now, in this strange, storm-laced airport, I was finally the main character in my own. I don't know how long I sat there. At one point, I saw them, Melanie and Daniel. They were walking past the bookstore, heading for their gate. She held his arm like nothing had happened. But something had. I could see it in the way her steps no longer matched his, in the way she held herself slightly hunched, like she was shrinking under invisible weight. Daniel was talking, animated, smiling, but she wasn't really listening. Her eyes were scanning the crowd again. She was looking for me. I didn't hide. I didn't wave. I didn't flinch. I just sipped my tea and watched her pretend. She caught sight of me right before they turned the corner. It was quick, a single second, but it was enough. Her whole face changed. Her smile faltered. Her grip on Daniel's arm tightened like a reflex. He didn't notice. He just kept talking. But I saw her eyes. I saw what she was trying to mask with calm and control. Panic. It wasn't the kind you get when you're afraid of being caught. That part had passed. This was something deeper. The kind of panic that sets in when you realize the version of yourself you've sold to the world is starting to rot from the inside. And now there's someone walking around, someone very real, who knows the smell of it. I turned away before they disappeared around the bend. I didn't need to see more. She had enough to deal with. And I, for once, had nothing to prove. But life wasn't quite done with us. About 20 minutes later, I got up to use the restroom. As I stepped out, I heard raised voices coming from near the row of vending machines. A couple arguing, something about phone calls, flight changes, and not now, Daniel. I froze for a second. Then I heard it. Her voice. It was unmistakable. Sharp, cornered, unraveling. I should have kept walking. I didn't. When I turned the corner, I saw them. Daniel stood stiff, hands up in disbelief. Melanie was facing him, furious and flustered. And I only caught part of it. Just enough to piece together what was happening. He had seen us. He'd come looking. Found her. Found us. Maybe he saw her cry, or heard something. Maybe he picked up on the way she clutched her bag like it contained a secret. But now he was asking questions. And from the look on his face, she wasn't answering them fast enough. Who was he? I heard him ask. His voice wasn't angry. It was hurt. Confused. Like a man watching the blueprint of his life suddenly curl up in flames. Why did you look at him like that? Melanie's reply was muffled, and then Daniel's voice again, louder. I asked you years ago if there was anyone before me I needed to know about. You said no. You said it ended clean. You said there was no one. Then silence. She looked down, said something too low for me to hear. Whatever it was, it broke him. Daniel backed up, like he'd been slapped. Then he looked straight at me. I didn't say anything. I wasn't there to destroy his world. That was never my goal. But in that moment, he knew. And not just because of me, because of her. The way she stood. The silence she couldn't keep. The history she couldn't deny. He saw it in her eyes, the way I did 9 years ago when I realized something was already gone, long before she left. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with nothing but her own reflection in the airport glass. She didn't chase him. Not immediately. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen. Then her gaze found me again. And what I saw in her face wasn't just guilt. It was fear. Not of me. Not of exposure. Fear of herself. Of who she'd become. Of what had finally caught up with her. We stared at each other. No words. No gestures. Just the two of us. Two people who used to be one thing, now strangers bonded only by wreckage. She finally turned and walked in the opposite direction of her gate. Alone. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. She wasn't running anymore. She was collapsing in real time, under the weight of the truth she tried to bury under another name, another man, another life. And it was finally catching up to her. I didn't see her for the rest of that day. After Daniel stormed off and she stumbled into the crowd, something in the air felt different. not just closure, a heavier than that. Like I had just witnessed the exact moment a person's carefully stacked tower of lies finally tipped and collapsed under its own design. And the strangest part? I wasn't angry anymore. Not even vindicated. I just felt still. For so many years I had replayed conversations in my head, imagined scenarios where I confronted her, made her admit it all, maybe even yelled, slammed a table, said something powerful that would haunt her forever. But life never gives you that kind of theater. It gives you silence. Chance meetings. Raw moments you don't see coming. And sometimes, they're more powerful than anything you could have scripted. I sat back down near gate 37A, the same place where it all started. And that's when something strange happened. A man I'd never seen before approached me cautiously, holding a backpack in one hand and a confused look on his face. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you Emmett?" It was like getting hit with a gust of cold wind. "Yes," I said slowly. He hesitated. "She told me she might find you here." My heart kicked. "Who?" "Melanie," he said. She's my cousin. She's not okay." I just stared at him. She had told someone? About me? "She's at the chapel," he continued. "Near the arrivals wing. Said she needed to sit somewhere quiet. She asked me to tell you don't have to come. But she'd understand if you did." I sat frozen for a moment. And then I stood. I walked. Not with purpose, but with something deeper, a pull I couldn't quite name. I didn't owe her anything. But this wasn't about her. Not anymore. I needed to see what she looked like now that the mask was gone. I needed to face her one more time, not as the man she left, but as the man who survived it. The chapel was dimly lit and mostly empty, except for a single figure in the third row. Her coat was draped over the seat beside her. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. She looked small. Not the radiant, confident woman who used to command every room. Just human. She turned as I entered, her eyes red, makeup smeared, and yet there was something honest about her face I hadn't seen in over a decade. "I didn't think you'd come," she said. "I almost didn't," I replied, taking the seat a few feet away. "But I figured, if we were both put here again, maybe it's not random." She nodded slowly. "He left. Daniel." I didn't reply. He said he needed time to think. But I don't think he's coming back. Still, I said nothing. Melanie shifted slightly toward me. I told him everything. About you. About what I did. Not just the surface-level version I used to tell people, the whole truth. I looked at her. "Why now?" She let out a breath that sounded more like a confession. "Because for the first time, I didn't want to control the story." That hit harder than I expected. She had always lived by narratives. Always framing things just right, saying just enough to look vulnerable without ever losing control. But now, for once, the version of the story that mattered wasn't hers. It was mine, and I wasn't interested in polishing it to make her feel better. "You didn't just leave me," I said slowly. "You rewrote me. Maybe the ghost in your next life. You wore your guilt like a badge of survival, told people I was the storm you escaped, when really, I was the quiet you abandoned because it made you face yourself." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them. She wasn't performing anymore. "I know," she whispered. I thought, maybe if I could control what everyone believed, I could forget what I knew. That I destroyed the one person who never once tried to change me. And now, I can't forget. I see it in your face. I see it in his. There was a pause, long and thick with memory. Then she added, "You deserved better. And the worst part is, I knew it. Even then." I looked down at my hands. "I'm not here to forgive you, Melanie," I said. "That's not what this is. You don't get to ask for that. Not after what it cost me to rebuild." She nodded. "I know. But I will say this," I continued. "I don't hate you anymore. Because I don't have room for that. Not in the life I have now." For the first time, her shoulders sank with a kind of relief that didn't look like victory. She wasn't free. But maybe now I was. We sat there a while longer. No more words. Just the space between us. Once a marriage, now just a shared past we'd both outgrown. She reached for my hand once, but I didn't offer it. When I stood to leave, she didn't stop me. As I walked out of the chapel and back toward my gate, I realized something. I hadn't just left her 9 years ago. I'd left a part of myself I didn't think I'd ever see again. But he was back now. Quieter. Wiser. Stronger. And finally ready to go home. I didn't cry walking out of that chapel. I didn't stumble or stop or look back. I just walked forward, and that, for the first time in a decade, felt like the most powerful thing I could do. It was strange, really. For so long I had imagined that healing would be loud, like a dramatic confrontation or some grand moment of closure that would put everything back in place. But in reality, it was quiet, gentle, like setting down a heavy bag you forgot you were carrying. The gate to my flight was already boarding when I arrived. I didn't rush. I moved with a calm that felt foreign but welcome. As I handed the attendant my ticket, she smiled and said, "Perfect timing, Mr. Callahan. You're all set." And for the first time in years, I believed it. The flight home was uneventful. I stared out the window most of the way, the clouds below like folded linen, clean, peaceful, undisturbed. In a way, it felt like the universe had pressed a soft reset on everything. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need her regret. I had something better. Peace. When I landed, my phone buzzed with a message from someone who mattered now, someone who wasn't tied to the wreckage of who I used to be. Her name was Marin. We met 6 months ago at a community lecture I almost skipped. She asked if the seat next to me was taken. I said no. It was the first real yes I'd meant in years. "Hey, did your flight land okay?" she wrote. "Hope the conference wasn't too soul-crushing. Want to come by for tea and the worst cookies I ever baked." I smiled. I replied, "Landed. Long day. I'll bring backup cookies." Then I paused, thought for a second, and added, "Also, thank you for not needing me to be anything other than myself." Her response came quickly. "That's the only version I want." And with that, I stepped into arrivals, not the airport kind, the life kind. I didn't think about Melanie again that night, or Daniel, or the envelope. I didn't need to. Whatever needed to be said had been said. Whatever remained was hers to carry. As for me, I had my own story now, one that wasn't written in pain, or loss, or betrayal, but in healing, in real connection, in late-night baking disasters and bad jokes and learning how to trust the quiet again. I went home, not to the apartment I once shared, not to the man I used to be, but to a place I'd made entirely for myself, a place that finally felt like mine. 9 years ago, she left me. 9 years later, I found myself. And this time, the only eyes I met across the room were looking back with love.